It was one of those quiet evenings when the city seemed to slow down for a moment. The streets shimmered under the soft glow of streetlights, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of freshly baked bread from nearby bakeries. In the heart of the city, a luxury restaurant stood quietly, its polished windows reflecting the lights outside. The restaurant was known for its elegant decor, delicate dishes, and impeccable service. People who came here expected perfection, a dining experience that felt like stepping into another world, far away from the noise of everyday life. That evening, the restaurant was filled with the usual mix of people, couples celebrating anniversaries, friends laughing over glasses of wine, and a few individuals sitting alone, quietly enjoying their meals while scrolling through their phones. The atmosphere was calm, almost serene, and the staff moved through the space with the practiced efficiency of those who had mastered the art of hospitality. Among the diners was someone who looked, at first glance, like any other person enjoying a night out. Dressed casually with a simple jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, he seemed determined not to draw attention. But there was something about his presence that felt quietly commanding, a calm energy that seemed to make the space around him slightly more grounded. He walked slowly through the restaurant, taking in the soft lighting, the neatly arranged tables, and the subtle hum of conversations. He wasn't in a hurry. Tonight he just wanted a simple dinner, a moment to relax and perhaps to enjoy a rare sense of anonymity. He chose a corner table, one that gave him a clear view of the entire room but also allowed him some privacy. Sitting down, he ran a hand over the polished surface of the table, noting the way the light reflected off the fine china and crystal glasses. There was a sense of calm that came with being in a space designed for comfort and elegance. He could feel the weight of the day slowly lifting off his shoulders. Soon, a waiter approached, carrying a notepad and wearing the polished smile that the restaurant expected from all its staff. The waiter greeted him warmly, offering the usual pleasantries and asking if he would like to start with a drink. The man nodded politely and asked for a glass of water first, just to settle in. The waiter nodded, noting the request, and disappeared into the kitchen area to fetch it. As he waited, the man looked around the restaurant. There were subtle details that most people might miss. The soft hum of the air conditioning, the gentle clinking of cutlery, the careful arrangement of the silverware all spoke to the level of care put into every detail. He appreciated that. He always had a deep respect for craftsmanship, whether it was in films, art, or, in this case, fine dining. Even in a moment as simple as sitting at a table, he noticed the care that went into making everything feel just right. When the waiter returned with the water, he set it down with practiced precision. That was when the incident began, though at the time, neither of them could have predicted it. The waiter, attempting to make conversation, said something that he thought was light-hearted. But instead of being friendly, it came out as slightly rude, almost mocking. He made a comment about the man's appearance, something about his plain or boring look meant to tease lightly. Most people would have shrugged off such a remark or responded with a polite smile. The man paused for a moment, taking a slow sip of water. He looked at the waiter, who was waiting for a response, and said nothing immediately. Inside, there was a mixture of surprise and mild amusement. He wasn't angry, not in the least. He had faced worse comments in his life, after all, but there was a strange irony in the situation that made it quietly amusing. Here he was, sitting in his own restaurant, being judged by someone who had no idea who he was. He could feel the other diners glancing over, sensing a shift in the energy at the table. The waiter, realizing that his words had landed differently than expected, shifted slightly, unsure how the man would respond. There was a moment of tension, the kind that happens when someone realizes they may have crossed a line but aren't entirely sure how far. The man finally spoke, choosing his words carefully. He didn't raise his voice, didn't scold, didn't show any hint of irritation. He simply explained that he appreciated when people were treated with respect, and that everyone, no matter who they were, deserved courtesy. His tone was calm, measured, but carried a quiet authority that made it clear he wasn't just another customer. At this point, the waiter's face went pale. He hadn't expected such a composed response, And he certainly hadn't imagined that the person in front of him was someone important. But still, he had no idea of the full truth. To him it was just a polite yet slightly firm correction. He nodded quickly, muttering an apology, and retreated to the other tables. Trying to shake off the awkwardness, the man sat back and took another sip of water, smiling faintly to himself. There was a strange satisfaction in watching someone realize their mistake, even if they didn't fully understand the situation. He enjoyed quiet moments like these, moments where patience and calm could make a bigger impact than confrontation. He always believed that true power didn't come from raising your voice, but from the quiet confidence in knowing who you are and handling things with grace. As the evening continued, he observed the restaurant with a sense of quiet pride. This was more than just a place to eat. It was a space that reflected the hard work, dedication, and attention to detail of everyone involved. And while most people didn't realize it, he had a personal connection to this place. He had invested in it, helped shape it, and cared deeply about how it operated. In a way, being here tonight wasn't just about enjoying a meal, it was about seeing the fruit of his decisions in action. Even if the staff didn't know exactly who he was, the waiter eventually returned, this time with a more careful approach. The previous comment had left a mark, but the man didn't hold a grudge. He greeted him with a polite nod and continued with the evening as if nothing had happened. He wanted the staff to understand that mistakes could be forgiven, but respect should always remain. While this part of the evening might seem ordinary to an outside observer, for him it was a small but meaningful reminder of how everyday interactions mattered. Whether in a film set, a public appearance, or a quiet dinner in a corner of a restaurant, the way people treated one another was always significant. It was a reflection of character, of values, and of the kind of world he wanted to live in. As the night went on, the man enjoyed the subtle rhythms of the restaurant, the way the light caught the crystal glasses, the quiet conversations that floated through the air, and the small acts of care that made the experience special. He knew that these moments, though seemingly small, were part of what made life rich and memorable. Sitting quietly in a corner, observing the world around him, he felt a sense of calm satisfaction. For him, the evening wasn't about confrontation, about proving a point, or about ego. It was about noticing the world, appreciating the details, and gently guiding those around him toward better behavior. In many ways, it was a quiet performance of its own kind of display of patience, humility, and understanding that spoke louder than any words could. And so, the first part of the night ended with a sense of quiet reflection. The man, still anonymous to those around him, had experienced a small but telling moment of human interaction, a reminder of the delicate balance between judgment and kindness, between arrogance and humility. It was the kind of evening that didn't make headlines, didn't demand attention, but stayed with him quietly as a small, significant memory of life's subtle lessons. The waiter had returned, tray in hand, moving carefully between the tables. He seemed to have calmed slightly after the earlier awkward exchange, but there was still a faint tension in his steps. Every so often his eyes darted toward the corner table where the casually dressed man sat. There was something about the way the man carried himself, calm, quiet, yet undeniably attentive. The waiter uneasy, the man, on the other hand, didn't pay much attention to the glances. He was more interested in the restaurant itself, watching the ebb and flow of activity as the staff worked to keep every table in perfect order. He noticed the subtle mistakes and the small successes, the way some servers managed to move almost invisibly through the crowd, and how others had to pause slightly to adjust or correct. To him it was a delicate dance, one that required both skill and mindfulness. When the waiter reached his table again, he leaned slightly forward and asked if he was ready to order. The man nodded politely, glancing at the menu for a moment before deciding. He had his favorites in mind, dishes that he had tried before and enjoyed quietly at home. But tonight, he wanted to experience the full atmosphere of the restaurant, to see how the flavors, service, and ambiance came together in a single evening. "Tonight, I'll try something different," he said softly. "Surprise me." His voice was calm, and there was a faint smile in his tone. It wasn't challenging. It was a simple request, an invitation for the waiter to share his expertise. The waiter paused, momentarily thrown off by the request. He had expected a simple order, not a chance to show creativity. For a brief moment, he felt a surge of pride at the idea of preparing something unique for this guest. But the earlier tension lingered in the air, a shadow that refused to fade entirely. He scribbled down the order, nodding, and moved away to pass it to the kitchen. As the man waited, he observed the other diners. A couple nearby laughed quietly at a shared joke, their joy soft and genuine. A small group of friends leaned in toward each other, speaking in hushed tones, their faces lit by the warm glow of candlelight. The atmosphere was intimate, peaceful, yet charged with the small, vibrant energy of human connection. He appreciated the scene quietly, noting how each interaction, however small, added to the life of the restaurant. Minutes passed, and the waiter returned with the first course. It was beautifully presented, with colors arranged carefully on the plate, and aromas that seemed to dance gently toward him. He thanked the waiter with a nod, picking up his fork and taking a small, deliberate bite. The flavors were delicate, precise, and satisfying. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the taste sink in, appreciating the effort that went into each detail. But then, as the waiter lingered nearby, something unexpected happened. In a casual, almost thoughtless tone, the waiter made another comment. This time, it was about the man himself, his casual clothing, his quiet demeanor. It wasn't harsh, but it was pointed enough to feel like a small jab, as if the waiter was judging him for being too ordinary to be here. "You look like you just walked off the street," the waiter said, almost as an afterthought. Not realizing the impact of his words, the man paused mid-bite, taking a moment to process what had just been said. He didn't react immediately. There was no raised voice, no glare, just a quiet awareness. He set his fork down slowly, looking at the waiter with calm, steady eyes. The energy in the air shifted slightly, though it remained subtle. Other diners might not have noticed, but those who were paying attention could feel the quiet tension growing. The waiter, unaware of who he was speaking to, leaned slightly closer, expecting some kind of reaction, perhaps embarrassment, perhaps anger, maybe even laughter. But the man remained silent for a moment longer, letting the words settle in the air between them. Then, in a voice that was calm but carried weight, he spoke. "I believe everyone deserves respect," he said softly. "No matter where they are, what they wear, or what they look like. Even in a restaurant, manners matter." There was no accusation, no anger, just a gentle, firm reminder. The waiter froze. He hadn't expected this response. He had assumed that the man would simply brush it off or respond with irritation, but this calm, controlled answer struck him differently. There was authority in the man's tone, not loud or commanding, but quiet and undeniable. The words carried a sense of experience, of wisdom, and of someone who understood the value of patience and human decency. For a moment, the waiter's mind raced. He realized that his attempt at humor or casual judgment had backfired. The situation was no longer simple, no longer just a casual interaction between a server and a customer. Something about the way the man spoke demanded attention and respect, and the waiter couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. The man didn't say anything further. He simply smiled faintly, took another small bite of his meal, and returned his attention to the plate. But the message was clear. Respect mattered, not as a rule to follow out of fear, but as a principle to guide daily life. The waiter muttered a quick apology, though it sounded more nervous than sincere. He stepped back slightly, adjusting his posture, unsure of how to proceed. He glanced at the nearby tables, perhaps seeking reassurance or distraction, but the calm presence of the man in the corner drew his eyes back. There was a quiet power in composure, a reminder that sometimes the loudest reactions weren't the most meaningful. As the evening continued, the waiter moved more carefully, speaking politely, and paying closer attention to each table. He carried plates and refilled glasses, but there was a new awareness in his movements, a recognition that words mattered just as much as actions. Even small, seemingly casual remarks could leave a lasting impression. The man, meanwhile, remained patient and observant. He didn't want to embarrass the waiter publicly, nor did he seek to create drama. He simply wanted the lesson to land gently, as a reminder that kindness and respect should always be the first instinct. He understood that people made mistakes, especially when they didn't have all the information, and he valued the chance to guide without harshness. While the waiter adjusted to this unspoken lesson, the man continued to enjoy the subtle pleasures of the evening. The soft music that floated through the restaurant, the careful presentation of each dish, and the polite interactions between staff and diners all added to the sense of calm satisfaction. He appreciated how the restaurant balanced luxury with warmth, professionalism with human touch. It wasn't just a place to eat. It was a space that allowed people to feel seen and cared for. Throughout it all, he remained quietly mindful of the irony of the situation. The very person being judged, criticized for appearances and demeanor, was also the one who had invested in this establishment, helping to create the environment in which the waiter now worked. It was a private joke of sorts, a small twist of fate that brought both amusement and reflection. The tension gradually eased as the waiter realized that his earlier words had been misplaced. There was no need for panic, no need for fear. The man's calm demeanor, combined with his quiet wisdom, had diffused the situation without drama. It was a reminder of the power of patience, humility, and understanding. As the night progressed, the man continued his dinner, savoring each dish and observing the rhythm of the restaurant. He noticed the subtle improvements the waiter made, the careful attention to detail, and the way the staff responded to his quiet presence. It was a lesson in human interaction, one that reinforced the idea that how we treat others, whether strangers, colleagues, or subordinates, shapes the energy of the space around us. By the end of the second course, the waiter had regained some confidence. He moved through the room with a more balanced approach, speaking politely, listening carefully, and offering thoughtful suggestions. There was a newfound respect in his demeanor, not just for the man in the corner, but for the idea that every customer deserved attention and kindness. The man, observing all of this, felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. He hadn't needed to raise his voice, argue, or punish anyone. A simple reminder, delivered with calm authority and genuine respect, had changed the course of the evening. It was a small victory, one that reinforced his belief in the quiet strength of patience, humility, and understanding. As the dessert course was brought to the table, the waiter approached with a soft smile, careful to avoid any slip of the tongue. He placed the dessert gently before the man and offered a polite, sincere comment about the evening, as if acknowledging the unspoken lesson that had taken place. The man nodded in appreciation, returning the smile with warmth and quiet acknowledgement. The interaction, while brief, had left a lasting impression. For the waiter, it was a lesson in professionalism and human decency. For the man, it was a quiet reminder that even small moments could carry great significance. In life, he thought, it was often the subtle interactions, the choice of words, the tone, the awareness of others that mattered most. And so, the second part of the evening drew to a close. The man continued to enjoy the quiet pleasures of his meal, the restaurant buzzing softly around him, while the waiter moved through the space with a careful, thoughtful approach. It was a story of small lessons, human connection, and the power of calm authority to transform an ordinary night into something quietly memorable. The evening continued with the soft glow of the chandeliers casting a warm light over the tables. Conversations floated gently across the room, the clinking of cutlery mixing with the quiet hum of the soft music playing in the background. For most of the diners, it was just another elegant night out. But at the corner table, something quietly unusual was about to happen. Something that would turn the night into a story that no one present would soon forget. The man had eaten slowly, savoring each course with quiet appreciation. He noticed the small details, the way the light caught the edge of the glasses, the gentle curve of the napkin folds, the careful plating of each dish. But there was something more pressing on his mind. The earlier interaction with the waiter, while resolved politely, had left a subtle tension in the room. He knew that while the situation had been handled with patience, there was still a lesson to be shared. Though it would need to be done carefully, after a moment of quiet thought, he asked the waiter to come over once more. The waiter, slightly hesitant, approached the table, holding his notepad and wearing a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There was an unspoken awareness in the air. He wasn't sure what would happen next. And there was a flicker of nervousness as he tried to steady his steps. The man looked at him calmly, meeting his eyes directly, and spoke in a tone that was soft but carried an unmistakable authority. "I think it's time you understand something important," he said. There was no threat in his words, no anger, just a quiet confidence that made the waiter pause, unsure of what to expect. "I'm not just a guest here tonight," the man continued. "I'm part of the reason this place exists. I've invested in this restaurant and I care deeply about it." He let the words settle, watching the waiter's reaction carefully. The subtle shift in the waiter's posture was immediate, though he still didn't fully grasp the meaning. His eyes widened slightly, and there was a tension in his shoulders, as if he suddenly realized that the simple exchange earlier might have been more significant than he had imagined. The man leaned back slightly, smiling faintly, the kind of smile that was calm, knowing, and patient. "I am one of the owners of this restaurant," he said simply, letting the words hang in the air. "Everything you see here, the care and the details, the quality of the service, it's partly because of people like me who believe this place could be something special." The waiter froze completely. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For a moment he just stared, the recognition slowly dawning on him. The casual remarks he had made earlier, the teasing, the judgment, suddenly felt completely out of place. He had spoken without knowing, without any idea that the person in front of him had a direct connection to the very establishment he served. Other diners, noticing the subtle shift in the air, began to glance over. Something was happening at that corner table, something different from the usual rhythm of the restaurant. There was curiosity in the way they looked, but also a kind of quiet awe. No one spoke, but the room seemed to hold its breath. Sensing that a revelation was unfolding quietly but profoundly, the waiter, still shocked, tried to find words. I didn't know," he stammered, his voice low and unsteady. "I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, I didn't realize." His eyes flicked downward briefly, as if embarrassed to meet the man's calm, steady gaze. The apology was sincere, tinged with the nervous realization that his earlier behavior had been inappropriate. The man nodded slowly, acknowledging the apology without harshness. He understood that people made mistakes, especially when they didn't have the full picture. "I understand," he said quietly. "But it's important to remember that respect matters, not because of who someone is, but because of who you are. How you treat people says more about you than them." The waiter swallowed hard, nodding quickly. There was a flush of shame on his face, mixed with relief that the man was handling the situation with patience and dignity. It was a lesson he would not soon forget, a moment that would shape how he treated every customer from that day forward. The man continued, speaking calmly, explaining his connection to the restaurant in more detail. He shared how he had invested time, money, and thought into creating a space where people could feel valued, where service wasn't just about efficiency, but about care. He spoke of his belief that every small action, every detail of the dining experience, reflected something deeper about human connection and respect. Listening to him, the waiter began to see things differently. The earlier judgment he had passed in a casual moment now seemed small, insignificant, and misplaced. He realized that the man's presence in the restaurant wasn't just as a customer. It was as someone who had shaped the very environment he worked in. Every decision, every dish, every little detail carried the weight of intentionality and care. The waiter's eyes, which had been nervous and unsure, now softened. There was genuine understanding and acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance of the lesson being shared. He nodded, repeating the apology more earnestly this time, and the man accepted it with a simple smile. There was no need for drama, no need for public embarrassment. The truth, spoken gently and calmly, was enough to convey the lesson. Other staff members, who had been watching from a distance, began to whisper softly among themselves. Some had recognized the man's face, others had not. But everyone could feel the subtle authority in the air, the kind of quiet presence that commanded attention without raising a voice. There was respect in the way he carried himself, a reminder that sometimes Influence doesn't come from loud words or displays of power, but from calm integrity and genuine care. The man returned his attention to his meal, picking up his fork once more, but the atmosphere at the table had changed. The waiter, now more careful, more attentive, moved through the room with a new mindset. The earlier tension had been replaced by a quiet sense of respect. Actions were now guided by awareness, and the subtle lesson of humility and mindfulness had been absorbed. For the man, revealing his identity wasn't about ego or authority. It was about sharing a truth that mattered, about creating a moment where respect and human decency were highlighted. He believed that small moments like these, handled with patience and care, could have a ripple effect, influencing behavior far beyond a single evening. He thought about how easily misunderstandings could arise, how small words could carry unintended weight, and how the presence of patience and calm could turn a potentially awkward moment into a meaningful lesson. It was a quiet philosophy he carried into every part of his life, public appearances, professional decisions and personal interactions alike. The waiter, now visibly calmer, approached again, offering a thoughtful suggestion about the next course, showing care in a way that was sincere rather than perfunctory. The man nodded, appreciating the change, and smiled faintly. There was a sense of quiet satisfaction, not in having proven anything, but in seeing the subtle transformation of understanding and awareness. As the evening progressed, the man continued to enjoy his meal, but he also observed the restaurant in a new light. He noticed the small interactions, the gestures of politeness, the way the staff adjusted to the rhythm of the room. Each action, each choice, now carried more awareness. The lessons shared at the corner table seemed to ripple outward, subtly influencing the energy of the entire space. There was a gentle irony in the situation that he couldn't help but notice. Just hours earlier, he had been treated casually, even insulted, as if he were just another customer with no significance. Now, the dynamic had shifted entirely. Respect, understanding, and awareness had replaced judgment and assumption. It was a quiet reminder of the unpredictable nature of human interaction, and the power of calm honesty and authenticity. The waiter, still slightly nervous but more composed, moved through the restaurant with care, learning to balance attention with humility. Other diners, though mostly unaware of the full story, sensed a subtle difference in the energy at the corner table. There was a quiet gravity, a reminder that even ordinary moments could carry significance when approached with awareness and respect. By the time dessert arrived, the interaction had fully transformed. The waiter approached with renewed attentiveness, careful to speak politely and thoughtfully, showing respect without hesitation. The man accepted the gesture warmly, smiling in acknowledgement, a simple yet profound confirmation that patience, calm, and humility could influence even the smallest moments. The evening, once potentially awkward, had become a quietly meaningful exchange, a lesson in respect, humility, and the subtle power of gentle authority. For the man, it was a reminder that influence doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it's the quiet honesty, the measured words, and the mindful presence that leave the deepest impact. As he finished his dessert, he looked around the restaurant, taking in the soft lighting, the careful service, and the peaceful energy of the room. The revelation of his identity had shifted more than just a single interaction. It had subtly shaped the atmosphere, reinforcing the importance of respect, awareness, and human decency in even the most ordinary settings. And in that quiet moment, as he sipped the last of his drink and prepared to leave, he felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The atmosphere in the restaurant had changed subtly after the revelation. What had started as a quiet dinner had transformed into a moment of reflection, not only for the waiter, but for everyone nearby who had noticed the gentle shift in energy. The man, having calmly revealed his connection to the restaurant, continued to eat his meal, but now with a quiet sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about ego or authority, it was about the human lesson that had just been shared. The waiter, still adjusting to the shock, moved with a new sense of purpose. He had spent the past hour learning an important truth, that respect was not something earned only through wealth, fame, or position, but through the way you treat people every day. That night he realized that small moments, casual comments, and even jokes could leave a lasting impact if not handled thoughtfully. He approached the table again, carrying a small tray with the next course. This time his movements were deliberate but careful, his words measured and polite. "I hope you enjoy this," he said quietly, a hint of sincerity in his voice. The man smiled, nodding with appreciation, acknowledging not just the gesture but the understanding behind it. For the man, watching this transformation was quietly satisfying. He didn't need an apology to feel validated. He already knew that people made mistakes, but the genuine effort from the waiter showed that even small lessons could be absorbed with humility. It was a reminder of something he had always believed, that patience, calmness, and quiet guidance often had a far deeper impact than anger, scolding, or public humiliation. As he ate, he noticed subtle changes in the way the staff interacted with him and the other diners. There was a new attentiveness, a careful awareness that went beyond mere duty. Servers checked in with smiles that were both professional and kind, adjusting their approach with thoughtfulness. Orders were handled smoothly, and the room carried a lighter energy, almost as if everyone had collectively absorbed the lesson without needing to be told. The waiter, in particular, seemed to carry a quiet humility now. He moved through the restaurant with a newfound mindfulness, speaking softly to the other staff and paying careful attention to the needs of the diners. It wasn't about fear or obligation, it was about awareness. He had learned that even a single moment of carelessness could ripple outward, and conversely, a single act of thoughtful guidance could also create a ripple of change. The man reflected on how often these small moments happened in everyday life. So many interactions, so many exchanges could easily go unnoticed, but each carried meaning. A kind word, a gentle correction, a patient gesture, these were the things that built character, shaped experiences, and sometimes quietly changed the way people behaved. He had seen it firsthand tonight, in the subtle shift of the waiter's behavior, and it reinforced a belief he had long held, that respect, patience, and humility were the true measures of a person. While the waiter regained his composure, the man also observed the reactions of the other diners. Some were unaware of the full story, yet they felt the change in the room. There was an almost unspoken acknowledgement of the importance of respect and professionalism. The energy of the space had softened, carrying a sense of calm dignity, a quiet recognition that even small actions mattered. After a moment, the man decided to speak with the waiter one more time. "You're doing well," he said softly, his tone encouraging. "Remember, this isn't just about serving food. It's about making people feel valued, about showing care in every interaction. That's what makes a difference, and it's what makes this place special." The waiter's eyes widened slightly, a mix of gratitude and relief. He had expected judgment or anger, but instead he received guidance, encouragement, and understanding. The words settled into him gently, and he nodded with sincerity, realizing that this was a lesson he would carry with him far beyond the walls of the restaurant. The man continued eating, savoring the flavors of the dishes before him, but he also reflected on the broader meaning of the night. It wasn't just about the waiter or the restaurant. It was about human interaction in its simplest, most powerful form. It was about noticing others, treating them with dignity, and guiding them when mistakes were made, not with anger or humiliation, but with patience and respect. As dessert arrived, the waiter approached with careful attention, placing the plates gently on the table. His movements were precise, his words thoughtful. "I hope this is to your liking," he said quietly. The man smiled, nodding with appreciation, and took a small bite. The dessert was as delightful as the previous courses, but tonight, the sweetness of the meal was matched by the subtle joy of a lesson shared and learned. Throughout the rest of the evening, the waiter continued to demonstrate the shift in his demeanor. He moved with a quiet awareness, attentive not only to the man at the table, but to every diner in the room. He listened carefully, spoke politely, and carried himself with a newfound mindfulness. The small moment of embarrassment he had felt earlier had been transformed into growth, an understanding of how words and actions carried weight. For the man, this transformation was quietly rewarding. He didn't need fanfare or recognition. The simple act of guiding someone toward better behavior, of reinforcing the importance of respect and patience, was enough. He understood that true leadership and influence were often invisible, quiet forces, shaping the world one small interaction at a time. He thought about the irony of the casual insult, the misjudgment, and now the subtle reversal. What had begun as a potentially awkward or tense situation had become a quietly meaningful experience. It was a reminder that life often unfolded in unexpected ways, and that patience, humility, and calm authority could turn even small moments into profound lessons. The waiter, having absorbed the lesson, continued to approach his work with care. Every plate he carried, every word he spoke, reflected a newfound understanding of the impact of human interaction. He moved not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to do better, to be mindful, and to show respect. The man observed all of this quietly, feeling a sense of satisfaction that came not from being recognized, but from knowing that the lesson had been learned. The restaurant, now carrying a sense of calm dignity, seemed to breathe a little differently. Other diners, though unaware of the full story, felt the subtle change in energy. Conversations flowed more gently, movements through the room were smoother, and the overall atmosphere carried a sense of quiet harmony. It was a reminder that even small interactions could influence the larger environment, creating ripples that extended beyond a single table or a single evening. The man finished his meal with quiet appreciation, savoring the last bites and reflecting on the evening's lessons. He thought about how often small moments were overlooked, how easily words could hurt, and how patience and guidance could heal and transform. It was a philosophy he carried with him in life, that every interaction mattered, and that respect, humility, and kindness were more powerful than any authority or wealth. Before leaving, he stood and nodded to the staff, offering a warm smile. There was no fanfare, no dramatic gestures, just a simple acknowledgement of the people who worked hard to make the evening special. The waiter, now fully composed and aware, returned the nod with a sincere smile, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was a moment of human connection that didn't need words to be meaningful. As he walked out of the restaurant, the soft glow of the city lights welcoming him, he felt a quiet sense of contentment. The night had started like any other, with a simple desire for a meal in peace. Yet it had become something more, a moment of growth, understanding, and reflection. It was a reminder that life's most meaningful experiences often came from ordinary moments handled with care, patience, and humility. The waiter would remember this night for a long time. He had learned that mistakes could be corrected with guidance rather than punishment, that respect should be offered freely, and that even casual comments could carry unintended weight. It was a lesson in human decency, one that would influence how he approached every interaction in the future. For the man, the evening had been quietly reaffirming. He had witnessed the power of calm, patient guidance, the subtle transformation of awareness, and the ripple effect of human connection. It reinforced the values he held dear: respect, humility, and the quiet strength of presence. The night had not been about confrontation or ego. It had been about shaping a space where people could feel seen, valued, and understood. As he stepped out into the night, the city around him seemed a little brighter, a little more alive. The lesson of the evening lingered, not as a story of insult or embarrassment, but as a quiet testament to the power of patience, human kindness, and mindful guidance. Life, he knew, was often found in these small, seemingly ordinary moments, and it was up to each person to treat them with care, awareness, and respect. And so, the evening ended not with tension or regret, but with understanding, growth, and quiet satisfaction, a story of human interaction, humility, and the simple but profound impact of treating people with the respect they deserved.